elections approaches, there are growing concerns across the nation of checking violence before, during, and after the elections. Reports say many Nigerians have begun to change their bases as a result of fear that it may happen. The utterances of some political leaders and the manifestation of violence in some parts of the country, even before the election, appear to have heightened tension in the country. Stakeholders in the political sphere very much welcome the Abuja Peace Accord presided over by eminent personalities, including Mr. Kofi Annan, former UN Secretary General, and Chief Emeka Anyaoku, former Commonwealth Secretary General. Their focus is to turn the stakes, base the campaigns on issues at the national, state, and local government levels, a development that was highly applauded, especially by two topmost presidential candidates who from campaigns that will involve religious, ethnic, or tribal sentiments. How well are politicians abiding by the accord for peace and tranquility? Do politicians still hold on to the agreement that no election is worth the blood of any individual? What is the role of relevant bodies and custodians of morals in promoting peaceful elections? What should Nigerians expect? Do they have reasons for fears or worries of likely outbreak of violence during and after the elections? What is the way forward? We will attempt answers to these questions after this background report by Abdullahi Garba Ben Nkudu.
Already the campaigns have heightened, with politicians crisscrossing the nook and crannies of Nigeria. But really, this has not doused the apprehension of Nigerians on how the election will come and pass peacefully. This be unconnected with the experience of the 2011 general elections, when its aftermath left many people killed and properties worth millions of naira destroyed in parts of the country. The perception is that there is already a tense situation, as some of the campaigns were met with some violence, with attacks and destruction of campaign structures in some states. To save the situation and ensure that the 3 stages of the election, that is before, during and post-election period, come through peacefully, stakeholders continue to meet and promote decorum on the part of the politicians and their supporters. At different fora, stakeholders urge all those involved to put national interests above partisanship.
I encourage all the politicians to be professional and ethical. Violence will not, it has never, changed an election result. If an election is conducted fairly, politicians should accept the majority view. If it is not fair, if it is clearly not fair, the courts are the place to go.
In any general election or elections, there must be a loser and a winner. Let both the loser and the winner express and exhibit the spirit of sportsmanship, and in the event of not conceding to the result or process of elections, any aggrieved party should go to court, where their grievances can be properly ventilated, rather than violence, which may eventually turn the local, state, and the nation at large into a chaotic situation, thereby causing unrest in the nation.
Very important, very saddening, is a major concern. We have been going through this in most time in the country, and the signs are not looking too good. But as civil society, we have to continue to educate people, work with young people. The media must continue to spread the message. And politicians need to be circumspect. They need to measure, they be measured. They should know what to say and what not to say. They need to behave responsibly. When they go out there for their campaigns, they should stop dangerous speeches. They should stop hate speeches. They should stop speeches that will incite young people.
What gives hope to wish the country well is the recent accord of non-violence elections signed by the 14 presidential candidates. Both the electoral umpire and stakeholders in the election project are working hard to promote this non-violence message.
In the next month's elections, we have to secure 155,000 voting points. at which an expected 68.8 million voters would cast their votes. And collation will take place in over 9,000 collation centers, in addition to the fact that there are at least 812 INEC offices nationwide.
We should be conscious, and the local communities, the call is going to reach them so that there will be exchange of ideas, exchange of information. When things are going on in the places where the security agency are not there, it is very important for individual, group, and local communities to know what to do by either making calls or sending text messages to reveal information, especially the one that could lead to violence.
Aversing those violence has to do with transparency in the process, good governance, taking care of people's, or let's say, dealing with people's fears and concerns, and removing all manner of boundaries, imaginary boundaries that are tearing us apart as a nation.
With all hands on deck, it is a positive signal that despite the apprehensions in the land, the 2015 election will come and pass with the country emerging the winner. In Abuja, Abdullahi Garba Birnankudu, NTA News.
Thank you, Abdullahi Garba Birnankudu, for that comprehensive background report. Our focus tonight is holding free, fair, and violence-free elections. And in the studio are a very distinguished panelists to discuss this very pertinent issue. From my immediate right, we have the distinguished presence of the Inspector General of Police, Suleiman Abba, CFR. We have the Director of Voter Education of INEC, Mr. Oluwole Osaze Uzi.
Good evening.
And in our JOS Network studio is Professor Sam Egu, a political scientist right now with the Political Science Department of the University of Jos. Professor Egu, you are welcome once again to Tuesday Live.
Thank you very much. Was just a response, if you like, maybe a wake-up guide for the political party leadership and misconduct or the unlawful conduct of the actors. So I want to say that apart from these provisions, apart from the efforts in the accord, there do not seem to be deliberate efforts on the part of the politicians to send the message down the line to the grassroots, to their followers, so that they get guided by these provisions as well as what they committed themselves to. And that is why perhaps in the campaigns now, we have witnessed some, I would say, isolated incidents relating to violence, of course, or to commission of crime in some of the states.
So, in other words, there has not been substantial compliance to the accord, the spirit of the accord.
Perhaps it has not gone down the line. And unless there is a deliberate effort from the leading political party leaders or the politicians themselves to send that message down, sensitize their followers, and even comply with the provision. It is part of the provision, for example, in their Code of Conduct in Article 2, that all the political parties will cooperate with security agencies to identify their followers who are involved in violence and support the security agencies in making sure that they are arrested, they are investigated, and they are punished.
Aji, thank you so very much for this preliminary assessment. But let's hear the lady and the gentleman. Let's hear what is their take on the compliance level, if you like, of to this accord by politicians.
Yes, I think that a beginning point in looking at the issue of violence in our electioneering campaigns starts with the importance of elections in a democracy. Because a democracy is a form of government that grants sovereignty to the people, which they exercise through elected representatives. So an election is a major pillar of democratic governance. And when it is flawed, either by violence, fraud, manipulations, then it becomes, democracy becomes elusive. It becomes impossible to consolidate democracy, in our nation. Now, when you look at it from this perspective and see the importance of fair and free and fair elections, violence-free, in terms of giving credibility to the election process and to our democracy, then it is something that everybody, all and sundry, must take seriously. Not just the politicians themselves, the security agencies, our institutions generally, and every Nigerian. And having said that, I must say, arising from what the IGP has said, that the main actors themselves, which are the political parties and the politicians, have committed themselves to comply to the existing laws guiding the electoral process. But the experience we see all across the country leaves so much to be desired. Even from the party primaries, in almost most of the states, we have issues. There are issues of parallel electioneering, parallel primaries, and all kinds of undercover activities that really is not acceptable. And if these are leaders who are people who are going to lead us, people who should lead by example, and this kind of shameful display is what is going on, then it gives cause for great concern. I would say that there has been, I wouldn't call them isolated cases, there has been unacceptable levels of violence, motivated by, of course, the do or die attitude of politicians in prosecuting their desires to lead. That is unacceptable. And I'm sure as we go on in this program, we can discuss some of the issues, some of the causes, and what can be done to arrest them.
Certainly we will. Mr. Osaze Uzi, as a representative of the Independent National Electoral Commission, the election management body itself, your comment will be very germane to the two preliminary assessments we have had.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. The Abuja Accord, as the IG said, isn't in itself necessarily a new thing. Basically, it's a restatement, as you rightly said, of the codes that the parties had earlier voluntarily entered into. They had signed this code of conduct put together by IPAC, by the parties themselves, subscribed to by all the parties. So this basically is a restatement. The addition is that the presidential candidates have now joined their parties in restating what the parties have committed themselves to do. With or without that, the laws and legal framework still makes provisions for any deviation from those norms that have already been spelled out. But why go to look for penal provisions when the parties can voluntarily agree among themselves to behave in a certain way to ensure peaceful and credible elections? If they stick to this voluntary instrument to which they have voluntarily subscribed to, there'll be no need for a resort to the bite of the law in ensuring that we have a conducive atmosphere for the conduct of elections. So we support anything that will douse tensions, we support anything that will help provide a conducive and enabling environment for people to exercise their franchise freely. Because no election can be said to be credible if it's held in an atmosphere of threats or of violence. So that is the importance. I think, if nothing else, is the symbolism. But we don't lose sight of the fact that it's a restatement of what they had earlier voluntarily acceded to themselves. The issue now is whether they were prepared to stick to these things which, as ladies and gentlemen, they've agreed to. Of course, if they don't, then we'll have to have a fallback position of the law to regulate such conduct.
What is an preliminary assessment of the level of compliance?
Well, first of all, don't forget that in the recent past, we've heard things like do or die. We've heard things like the baboon and the monkey will be soaked in blood. We've heard things like rig and roast. So the rhetorics somehow have been toned down. That is a significant step forward. But whether they are prepared to walk the talk is another thing entirely. It could be worse. But then again, the recent happenings, even after the signing of the accord, leaves a bit to be desired, especially where some people cannot go freely to campaigns, billboards, or campaign posters being unlawfully pulled down. That's not to suggest that if these are erected in contravention of the law, that action should not be taken in that regard. So first of all, those who are erecting billboards and posters should ensure they don't deface the places and ensure that they comply with all rules and all regulations and all laws. Because if they don't, then whoever is putting them down probably has the statutory right to do so. But it's such that if there's a rule of law, if each and every group complies with basic democratic norms, there will be no need for interventions.
Thank you so very much. Let's go to Professor Sam Egu, the political scientist. Let's hear his view. Professor Egu, your comments on the level of compliance so far to the Abuja Accord.
I think it's very obvious that all the signposts to disaster are beginning to emerge. As I'm talking to you, there are many families that are preparing to live where they are, to return to their villages and allow these elections to hold before they return because of anticipation of the high level of violence. And what has happened between the signing of that accord and now actually gives credence to the fears of people. I think we must hold politicians to stick to their promise, to their commitments, and we also need to let them know that this country does not belong to the political class alone. It belongs to all of us, and that election is merely a vehicle for ascertaining opinion of people about who should lead them, and it shouldn't be turned into a violent activity, because that will simply rubbish the whole notion of electoral democracy. And I think we need to also warn politicians to refrain from dangerous manipulation of ethnic, regional, and religious sentiments. This is going on. And the kind of messages they are passing to their followers will be a major source of violence, even if the actors themselves are not seen to be perpetrating violence. I think the kind of messages, the kind of information, the kind of mobilizational language they are using should be toned down for the sake of this democracy. Thank you.
Professor Egu, thank you so very much. What can we really say are the reasons behind the emerging trends now of all these cases? Does it have anything to do with the utterances of the politicians, IGP?
Well, I must tell you, it's not just resulting from what is happening now. You really have to go down the history line. What has been the trend, really, in our political activities? If you go down and look at perhaps the negative features of our political activities, you will see that nothing that is happening now can be termed as something new. The fact that the winner takes all attitude, the stakes remain the highest, is perhaps the elites don't seem to have any other better business than perhaps going for political office, and therefore the attitude to take it and, of course, take it all. The attitude of not accepting the outcome even though you have signed, just like we said now, to accept INEC declared results without resort to extrajudicial activities in terms of the results and many other activities. I think the fear of the public generally is not about what is happening now. It's mainly in anticipation of what may come out after the results are declared. And all these are part of the futures, negative features of our political activities. The young men that are used to cause this violence are still the same. Young men who perhaps are exposed easily to these political office holders or contestants who have, disregard to the laws, all the laws we have mentioned now, and go on recruiting them against the provisions of the Constitution. Section 227 is very clear against the provisions.
What does it say?
It says that political parties shall be formed without resort to employment of youths, recruitment of armed persons, thugs clearly, and all that. But what is going on now clearly is a situation where these same youths are recruited, they are armed, they are directed on who to even attack, what to do, and other negative features that I just highlighted. So these are things that, cause what is happening now, and perhaps given the members of the public to anticipate that the same features we had witnessed before are likely to happen again.
Dr. Baraki, is it possible to say the
problem we are facing in Nigeria is that the politicians seriously are making unacceptable comments, which is able to cause crisis. But mostly, my blame goes to the security agencies. They have a strategy. They have a strategy. How to conduct them, advise them, keep them. They need to call them, get their son, speak to them. Are they above the law? Not even the opposition and not even the ruling party, the ruling government. And the high you should give a full response to the question, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Certainly, the IGP is capable to respond to your question. It appears, Mohammed from Mina, what the issues is raising is related to what Professor Samegu had raised from Jos. So, IGP, I think you want to comment here.
Well, let me say that the whole purpose of policing generally is to prevent crime. Can be an arm. It's not the place where you exhibit your party slogan or
symbols.
Many symbols and many other activities. So you can see, Mohammed, this is not the kind of place.
The 300 radios.
Yes.
Does it also include a situation? I think Mr. Uzi will also want to come in here. Does it involve a situation whereby a voter who had already cast his vote,
yes,
can he remain within the 300 radios,
yeah,
or he must be outside the 300 radios after casting his vote?
He can remain, but the problem is, it is advisable in view of the activities that can result into committing an offense. It is advisable to really stay completely calm or go about your lawful business or go back to your home.
Mr. Osadeuzi.
Yes, I think taking up from where the IG left off, you should not in any way be disruptive. You can watch proceedings. You cannot shout slogans. You cannot start praising one candidate or party. You cannot disrupt anybody from attempting to cast their votes. Or there's so many things. So it's always better to keep a safe distance and not just talking distance, but side distance. but you're allowed to observe in a passive manner. Stay quiet, stay properly behaved, and observe. Of course, not to go to where people are casting their votes, because that must be done in secret. If it's not done in secret, then there's a challenge, or you're in breach of the law if you don't allow them to do that.
Emmanuel from Uyo, you're on to Tuesday Live.
Good morning, sir. My suggestion to Mr. IT. I just want you to caution your men, because of what happened in Akwa Ibom State in 2011, the situation whereby the policemen was aiding the government party to win the election in Akwa Ibom State in 2011. So I want to do something about that, because many of the time they will even assist the government party to do whatever. If the opposition wants to intervene, police will now begin to beat them seriously, and this will be scary. Where and the boys being trained by the government party will be getting there and some printing the ballot papers, and do whatever they like and take it to the INEC without the other party having hand in it. So I wanted to caution the policemen this time around, because this is a thing that used to cause the electoral violence, and there was serious fighting, throwing of bottles and causing problems here and there. So I just want you to do something about that, so that in this 2015, such a thing will not repeat itself again, because that's something that used to cause bloodshed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. I think related to that, the issue raised by Emmanuel, IGP, is the issue of senior, or rather very high-ranking public officers who have orderlies or ADCs coming to the vicinity of polling units.
We have said it and we are repeating it here. No senior officer or public officer entitled to even orderlies will be allowed to go to the polling units with their orderlies on the election day. That does not mean that they will not go with some level of security, but they will not go in a manner that will be intimidating to the voters. But I still want to talk, Mohammed, about the issue of the polling units. Unless we are trying to turn the polling units into a war zone, remember I said there are so many things that when you do, you are likely to commit an offense. One of it is that you cannot contest the results declared by the INEC official
at the polling
units. So what are we really talking about? And the parties themselves, they know it is also in their code of conduct not to contest the results declared by the INEC official, except through the normal process, which is by going by way of petition to the tribunal. I have a responsibility to caution on whatever will cause violence, and I think this is one area that we must be very, very careful about. Politicians have a responsibility to join us in this effort. And the earlier this is taken down the line, the better.
Mr. Osazewuzi, you may want to jump in here on the issue of ADCs or orderlies accompanying very senior public officials to polling units, even though the IG had already cleared that. But related to that is the issue of some of senior public officers going to polling units and saying they are observing the election.
No, unless you are an accredited election observer or accredited party agent, you have no senior officer, no officer has the right to go into a polling unit that is not his. He has a right to go there as a candidate to cast his vote, and when he finishes, he behaves like every other citizen. Don't forget, we say armed policemen are not even allowed into the polling units. So even those providing security will not go into the immediate vicinity of the polling unit Of course, they can still have visual contact with their principals, no doubt. We even discourage them putting on uniforms and going too close there, because, and everybody, what he probably did not say, that even the security forces who are on electoral duty will have special badges and tags to show that they're actually on electoral duty. And the person who is even if it's in uniform, who is not on electoral duty, who is found there, there are certain consequences will follow. I just wanted to say also that the man from Akwa Ibom did actually not even talk about the election violence that was occasioned before the election in Akwa Ibom in 2011, where so many properties were destroyed. So yes, there are rules governing this, and the Inspector General of Police did make mention of the Interagency Committee on Electoral Security, where the security agencies, not just the police, all the paramilitary agencies, all the other security agencies, civil defense, the customs, the immigration, the prisons, all of them come together and do security planning and management for the election.
Professor Sam Egu, you want to come and jump in here?
I just want to make one point, which I think is very important. You see, as I said before, in an electoral democracy, political parties have very important role to play. Not just the presenting candidates for election. In fact, the roles played by political party in a democracy, there are so many and diverse, including educating their members. And my point really is that when you are looking at the overall capacity of political parties, one important dimension is the capacity of political parties to moderate the behavior of their members, followers, and supporters. So it's not just presenting candidates and making sure that they win. There are other intervening responsibilities of political parties. And I think the way the IGP is saying, political parties have a sacred duty to talk to their supporters that while you are remaining within the environment of voting, these are laws that you must not breach. And I think they need to collaborate with the police and other security agencies to educate their members about what constitutes breaches of the law on election day. And I think this is very important. So parties have to demonstrate that capacity, that they can actually moderate the behavior of their members.
Thank you, Professor Sam. We just got in some more tweets now. Isaac is saying how much of its personnel, or rather, he meant here the police, men, officers and men, will the IG be ready to make available for the election in view of other security challenges? And this other tweet from Bashir is saying that I absolutely believe the only way for free, fair, violence-free election is accepting the proposal by the National Security Advisor, Sambu. Another tweet is from Ahmad, is saying, why is it that INEC and the police don't allow agents to join them in the vehicle while transporting the results after an election? The very last tweet is from Priscilla. She's saying, how will INEC ensure that nursing mothers, physically challenged persons are not disenfranchised from exercising their voting rights? I think the IGP will quickly look at the issue of how many personnel will be deployed
the police,
all over the country. The
police have a responsibility to provide security to all I have highlighted: polling units, collation centers, INEC officials, the materials, protecting the materials, and so on. And we will still continue with our day-to-day routine crime prevention activities and so on. But the manpower to do all that in all these places, the police may not have enough. But because we are going to do it in a collaborative manner, which all the members of ISIS, as highlighted, including areas where, flashpoint areas, where we also will station some form of standby units to take care of perhaps perceived crisis and so on. We will make sure we have enough men to do that. And in some of these areas, certainly we will collaborate not only with other paramilitary organizations, but where necessary too, the military may be handy to assist us in that enforcement. But let me say that the police manpower will certainly be a little over 300,000 committed for the elections.
Some people are quoting 350,000. Is that right?
Well, our general manpower is about 350,000, and if I say that we'll commit a little over 300,000, and I think it's something close to that.
Well, very quickly, Mr. Uzi, in addition to the tweets I've read, there are these two emails that I think you should take along. Recruiting ad hoc staff, it appears to be false because a lot of people are willing to serve our fatherland through this mirror, but the recruitment process is questionable. How can people apply to be INEC ad hoc staff? That's one. The second email from Al-Amin is saying one of the major causes of election violence is that INEC officials are usually come late to the polling unit. How can this be averted?
Well, the experiences from Mekiti and Osun have shown that the logistics deployment has improved considerably since from 2007 and 2011. We have registration area camps now. We camp our personnel, not in the INEC local government office, not only in the INEC local government offices, but also in public schools and buildings near enough to the polling units such that they don't have to walk more than 1 or 2 kilometers to their polling units. So we've come much closer to the polling units. Materials will be collected under security cover to these camps, and from these camps are where deployments were made. In Nekiti and Osun, 90-something% of the polling units open on time. We recognize that fact, and we've, I think, more or less overcome the challenge about late commencement of polls. And as to recruitment of ad hoc staff, I wish the gentleman or lady who wrote in or tweeted in or known that we opened the portal. It's not open to everybody. There are categories of officers, of young men and women we train for this purpose. And the basic criteria is that you're educated and you're a graduate. You're a serving corps member. Where there are shortfalls, because generally some are more idealistic, they are more accountable in the sense that we have a collaboration with the National Service scheme. But if you're an unemployed graduate or an unemployed person who's been employed for so many years and you hope to get this, we ordinarily will not take you. So where there are shortfalls, we go to federal tertiary institutions because we must isolate our personnel from partisan influences. And a lot of the time in previous elections, you see that you train certain people, half of those people are partisan or sponsored by political parties, candidates or politicians. We don't want that to interfere. And I think the NYC young chaps have been doing a wonderful job, generally speaking. And if the Section 123 of the Electoral Act makes it an offense for people who are INEC officials to come late, and there are penal sanctions attached to late deployment where you knowingly do that, or you're sworn to do something and you don't do it, or you do it the wrong way, there are also penal sanctions attached to it. In any case, any youth corper who misbehaves or goes against the procedures has a certificate that can be held when we report that to the NYSC management.
Before I leave you, very quickly, so there is this question of non-amendment of the Electoral Act 2010.
Yes.
To what extent will that affect the 2015 election?
Well, it would have been better to amend that act, but as it is now, the act has not been amended, so we'll make do with the act. Don't forget that this was the act that we used in conducting the 2011 elections. And some even argue that the act in itself is a reasonable legal framework with sufficient checks and balances contained therein. We think it can be improved upon, but we'll make do with what we have.
Professor Ogu, will you want to come in here and comment on the non-amendment of the Electoral Act to accommodate some matters arising, like they say?
One of the key issues in the proposed amendment, which we lost because the process could not be completed, is I think I don't know whether the request that INEC was making that you need to extend the number of days for conducting a rerun should the need arise from 7 to 21 days. I don't know whether that was eventually reflected. If it is not reflected, it could be a problem, but I think as the INEC man himself said, it is quite, the framework is quite reasonable. But if we have challenges, for example, like a runoff and you have very little time to do it, it could be a major issue of anxiety. I hope that does not arise in 2015. This is just my response to that.
Dr. Oparaike, do you think there will be any substantial effect due to the non-amendment of the Act?
Well, I can only hope that we don't run into that bottleneck, because clearly the timing is a bit restrictive, and of course, which was the basis for the proposed amendment, which of course couldn't go through. So we can only hope that we don't run into that hitch.
From the perspective of the security agency, IGP, is the non-amendment going to be of any effect?
Muhammad, I want to believe that just as the director from INEC said, we have good law in our own hands. The most important thing is to educate ourselves on the provisions and to comply with those provisions. I want to believe that INEC would always adjust where it is necessary for it to adjust to take care of the inadequacies as being perceived by the commentators.
Gentlemen, I will want, and ladies, I want you to make your last comments with this question in mind. Professor Egu, I will start with you. Will you say Nigerians have reasons to be apprehensive over the likelihood of violence during, after the elections?
I think Nigerians have reason to be apprehensive because of the history of violence in our electoral politics, beginning from the first, second, and the experiences since 1999.
In spite of the assurances of the IGP?
Nigerians have a commitment to make this democracy work. And part of that commitment is to sacrifice and build that synergy and civic responsibility that can, overcome all the threats that people are already seeing. And that is the sense in which I think the 2015 elections at once provides threats and at the same time opportunity. We should be able to use the opportunity to consolidate our democracy. That is my sincere feeling.
Mr. Oluwole Osaze Uzi, should Nigerians be apprehensive?
Well, naturally, as Professor Egu said, recent and past history would ordinarily make us apprehensive. Well, I think there's a shift, there's a change, and the will of the Nigerian people to ensure that their vote counts, to ensure that people behave in accordance with laid down rules. I think I perceive that there will be, I'm optimistic that there will be a change and that the violence will be minimal. We live in a violent society. We live under the spectrum of violence all around us. But I don't think that Nigerians will be misled this time into going into violent orgy.
What assurance will you give for the ownership of the PVCs by the first week of February?
Oh, certainly by all the PVCs will have arrived, and they will be at a distribution point for collection by the owners of those PVCs.
Dr. Oparaike, should Nigerians be apprehensive after all we have discussed, all the issues, especially the assurances by the IGP?
Yes, I would say that although the police has the constitutional right for security of lives and property, security is really everybody's business. And concerning the elections, every Nigerian is a stakeholder. And I think that we all have a duty to pray for peaceful elections and therein secure prosperity for ourselves. There's a scripture that says that, through peace, we can have prosperity. And, so we all have an obligation. Without a peaceful atmosphere, nothing can work. So every Nigerian has a duty. We've talked about the institutions that manage elections, INEC, security agencies, political parties, politicians. But every Nigerian has a duty. And I think it's a collective responsibility. If we face it positively,
thank you very much, Dr. Oparaike. The IGP, what other assurances will you give because all the panelists, the three panelists, including yourself, minus yourself now, have all said Nigerians, in spite of what you have said, have every right to be apprehensive. So if the Nigerians should be apprehensive, what other assurances will you give them as we end the discussion?
They are apprehensive, or some Nigerians are apprehensive because of the history of violence in our electoral processes. They are because of the actions of politicians who, to date, do not seem to have done enough, to convince their followers in avoiding this violence. But let me say that because of the collaborative manner in which we are handling issues, the lessons learned and the collaborative manner in which we are handling intelligence, in particular, our ability to assess threat to violence or threat of violence, our ability to identify. Let me tell you, recently, in that collaborative manner, we were able to identify over 2,000 flashpoints. We were able to identify over 300 leaders of thugs in this country. And with this kind of efforts, I want to say that...
Have you arrested them?
Well, of course, arrests are...
Or you are monitoring them?
We not all, some you monitor, some you arrest, some you even bond without the necessity of detention. Let me say that everything will be done, and in the most collaborative manner, by all security and law enforcement agencies, including the military, whose assistance we may seek where necessary, to make sure that the level playing ground is provided for each electorate to go and cast his vote and enjoy the peace we are known to be enjoying.
Inspector General Suleiman Abba, thank you so very much for running off that our discussion, holding free, fair, and violence-free elections. That is the topic for this week's edition of Tuesday Live. It is my responsibility now, on behalf of the NTA, to thank the Inspector General of Police, Suleiman Abba, CFR, MPM, MNI, for coming and for all his comments.
Glad to be here, indeed.
Dr. Catherine Okparake, former delegate, National Conference, and the past President, Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, former Group Managing Director of Nigerian Insurance, and former Commissioner of Finance in Imo State. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here.
Of course, Mr. Oluwole Osazi Uzi is not Director of Voter Education. INEC is not one person that will be tired of coming, because we will certainly call you again. The elections will soon be here, and the issues will always, we can't exhaust them really. I mean, so, but again, thank you for coming and for all your explanations.
Thank you for
and perspectives.
Thank you.
Of course, Professor Sam Egu in our JAWS Network Center, thank you so very much for your insights.
Thank you so much, too. Thank you.
Viewers, this is where we end this discussion, holding free, fair, and violence-free elections in 2015 was our topic and focus in this edition of Tuesday Live. Until next week, when we come your way again with yet another topic, I'm Muhammad Kudu Abubakar saying bye for now.